care cost action. Apparently, if you ever go to Brussels in the central cost center, everybody tends to know by heart the number of their actions. People are, okay, so what is your number? I don't know by heart the number of our maximum alternative, let's just say to leave of care. I guess before we start, since most of you don't know one another, I think a very good round, just your name, where you come from, what's your affiliation, just that, so that later on when we start talking, we can maybe go through this step now so that we don't have to do it later on. The first part is that I'm going to make a very good presentation about the broader context of the toolkit of care, what it is, why care, and so on. I reckon it will be around half an hour, plus some video material and things for what you have done until now. This is the first year that we're running this action. And then maybe we can talk a little bit about the things, and on the second part I will present you this thing over here. Okay, what you see then what it is. Before we do that, I guess let's do a quick round. I'm Marios Christomichalis. I work in the Cyprus University of Technology, where I'm an assistant professor, and I also direct the Media Arts and Research Laboratory. This is in Limassol, Cyprus.
I'm Angeliki Poulou. I'm a member of Media Electronic Art Collective. I'm there as a curator and dramaturg. And we are part of the Toolkit of Care, Athens. And also I'm assistant professor at the University of Athens at the Department of Digital Arts and Cinema. And my discipline is history and theory of contemporary art and media.
Can I ask your name again?
Angeliki Poulou.
Angeliki Poulou. And the past and close to my Thailand.
I'm Miga, or Mindaugas Gapšavičius, is my full name. I'm Lithuanian.
Good luck writing that down.
I'll look at the thing later.
Yeah, and I'm affiliated with Instituto Media, right? But I'm working also at Bauhaus University in Weimar, where I have done recently a conference where many of you came also to Weimar. Happy to be here in Athens and joining this. Thanks.
I'm Fanny Constantinou. I'm an artist, I'm a musician, and a PhD candidate in cultural musicology in the University of Amsterdam, and a lecturer of electronic music.
I'm Zuzana Trajkowska. I'm coming from Macedonia. I work in the institute that we develop project with artists. So I'm a project developer and project coordinator. And since the Creative Europe is now open, we are all here so we can think about something about connecting care with
I am Omar. I came from Turkey, and this is my first time. I also working on Kırklareli near the Greece. My subject is distance learning, learning education, educational technology, instructional technology.
I'm Amin Ashtaya from Tunisia. I'm senior lecturer at the Higher Institute of Art and Craft in Sfax at the University of Sfax. I was also the head of the design department in our institute. Now I'm the head of studies and the vice director of our Higher Institute. I coordinate the project in fashion sustainability because I'm mainly in textile and fashion design. And it's my first time to be discussing.
Hi, I'm Diana Georgiou.
I'm a writer, curator, and associate lecturer in the Visual Cultures Department at Goldsmiths University in London.
Hi, I'm Julie from Brussels, Belgium, and I work as a curator, and I'm also a researcher affiliated with the Vrije Universiteit Brussels. That's the Flemish side of the Free University of Brussels.
Hi, I'm Menelaos. I'm a mechanical engineer and energy sources. So I'm a musician. I'm here joining the company.
Hi, I'm Manus Glass. I'm a visual artist and a acoustic music composer. I'm also a former student of Marinus from the Contemporary Music Research Center here in Athens.
Hi, I'm Penny Travel. I'm a senior lecturer in cultural geography and theory in the School of Architecture and Landscape Architecture at the University of Edinburgh. And I'm here because my work is related with collaborative practices and emerging networks, including digital artists, activists, and alternative, say, economies and communities working around it. And the work I do relates with care practices and care ethics very much.
Hello, I'm Priscilla Metkopoulou. I am an art theorist, and I work at the University of Macedonia at the School of Balkan, Anatolian and Slavic Studies. And I am a fellow there. And I am here because during my postdoc, I researched the topic of feminist care and feminist aesthetics of resistance. So, yes.
Hi, I'm Kolas Rouzakis. I'm a senior researcher in KEPE, Center of Planning and Economic Research. I'm also a senior researcher in the Institute of Bard College in New York. Except for that, I'm best man of Marinos, and I don't want to talk about my artistic side. There is also
Hi, I'm Jenny Pickett. I'm an artist and I work at the lab APO33 in Nantes. I'm also an associate lecturer at the architecture school in Nantes, and I'm doing my doctorate with Marinus. I'm the vice chair of this project.
Giuliano Tabe. I'm an artist researcher, PhD in arts, and also part of APO33. And we are streaming, so just you know, it's part of the archiving. So whatever you say is recorded and will be worked on reports.
So maybe that's the right time to say that I also work as a porn star, or not. Maybe that's not. That's a joke, everybody. Okay, so I will start with this standard presentation to explain a little bit of what this process is about to everybody. Here we have a very nice collection of people that range from persons who are actually in the management committee of the project to people who are into some working group but maybe have not participated in something or have not actively been involved until now, to people who have been actively involved and participated in a few activities already, and to people who are prospective members who are not yet in the network but they plan to be, and they are very like-minded. So this, I guess, will explain a little bit on the context, what we try to do. And then we see, if necessary, I can also bring you some more specific data on what we've done till now, but we'll see later on. So, toolkit of care. What about care? Well, I guess I have to say that lately, care is a super trending thematic. It's quite a very interesting coincidence, maybe, that this project arrived in a very timely manner. Maybe it's not a coincidence because after the pandemic, care has been we realize that it's something that we can't actually get away with it. We should seriously consider notions of care. But what is care? What do we mean by care? And apparently, care, there are many different actualizations of care, maybe different perspectives and ways of understanding care. We can't easily synthesize all this in just one thing. We can draw, nevertheless, a few facts. There are different actualizations of care. Care necessarily has some pretty serious ethical, social, political, and cultural implications. And we know that pretty well after COVID, where we've seen that it's not just a question of how I may express affections towards someone else, and that's it. But care can have many different kinds of forms, so that I maybe restrain myself and I lock myself at home as a way to care for other people, or maybe caring for myself so as to protect the others. And of course then we have all those ethical and political situations where care or the lack of care becomes politicized and becomes exploited by governments and by political systems and so on. And we realize all the cultural implications of this. I guess that this is something that humanity used to be well aware of, and maybe it still is under different contexts than maybe some indigenous populations and so on, but it's something that the Western society had probably forgotten for quite a while, and COVID came to force us to reevaluate this. And I guess thinking a little bit on what has happened in different parts of the world, Asia, North America, Australia, and Europe, it's easy to see that we can't talk about care about anything really without taking into some serious consideration the political implications of it, the financial implications of it, and essentially maybe a very brute force quantitative understanding of how all this translates in the language of the politicians and of the powerful people who kind of rule the world, and how they use all this data to do their political thing. Then we can understand care as all we do to maintain, sustain, and repair our world. And by world here, I'm not necessarily referring to the earth. I'm also referring to that. But by world, we may also understand this with respect to micro worlds, artistic communities, some particular context that is important for us, our own small or bigger ecosystems. Care concerns our bodies, ourselves, and our environment, but in ways that I guess are interwoven. So you can't care about ourselves without caring also about your body. You can't care about, and in COVID we saw that pretty well, you can't care about somebody else's body if you don't care about your own body. And it seems, we know that pretty well after 2 or 3 years of lockdown, that we are much more together in this than what we had originally thought, and what maybe capitalism and this way of seeing the world let us believe. Jenny in some other talk talked about the myth of the individual, which is something that we may need to return to this later on, and also talk a little bit about that. But if we move away from the myth of the individual and understand ourselves as living, for ourselves alone, and that's it, and we realize that this is not the case, that it takes more than just ourselves to have ourselves in the end of the day. We are brought in this world by others, we are raised by others, we enter this world and we collaborate with others, and we necessarily have to tolerate the presence of others. So care becomes a very important means, not just to provide affections to others, but also to relate with everybody else. Okay. So I guess all these ethical, social, political, personal, contextual implications of care and the different forms it could get, they are necessarily and almost always interwoven in complex way with one another. something which is very central to this project is the notion of aesthetics of care. But what is aesthetics of care? I mean, what is aesthetics of care? At this point, I am cheating a little bit, and I borrowed this from another project I'm involved. I'm also part in another project that is funded by Erasmus Plus called Aesthetics of Care and Ecology, Technological Education. So in this project, there is a working group that actually made some theoretical research on exactly this thing, what is aesthetics of care. And after working for several months, they came up with a definition, which I don't have here, because it's not that much about putting everything in a definition, but it's more about thinking in the right direction. So I've kept some key elements of what these definitions, the key points that make up this definition, and I present it here. So aesthetics of care is necessarily about a process. It's a process. It's not a thing. It's not a quality. It's a process. It's something that changes. It's something that happens, and it's always in the making. It's a cultural practice in a sense. It's a process. It concerns ethically responsible action. So ethics is entangled with aesthetics of care. It is informed and activated by sensory experience. That's another central point. We can talk about aesthetics of care and aesthetics of anything actually if we exclude the sensory experience. It has to be somehow related to the world that we phenomenologically understand through our senses. It does entail a caring for ourselves, for others, and for the planet. And these others here, this part, it breaks down, we'll see that in the next slide, to human others, and more than human others. And it's shaped by an aesthetic understanding, or by many different kinds actually of aesthetic understanding, by artistic practice, by crafts, and creativity. I've thought about all these things a lot over the last couple of decades. These words are very properly selected actually. Crafts, for instance, is something that artists and within artistic milieux and context, people tend to not include crafts, which is very problematic and very interesting. If people like, I guess some of you, are into humanity and this thing, I think this is very interesting because, artists sometimes try to reinvent the wheel. They talk about materiality, they talk about neo-materialism and all this, and they need to include into their creative practice and introduce within conceptual frameworks that are pretty dominant in artistic practice, certain kinds of materialism practice that are already well taken care of and well addressed by crafts and by things that are not necessarily dealt with as art. And then you have people like Timothy Ingold, for instance, who advocate a certain kind of thinking through crafts. But it is relevant to artistic practice, but it's not a kind of artistic-driven way of thinking, but it's a craft-driven way of thinking. So anyhow, I just a very quick note, what I want to notice that there is a lot of breadth, a lot of possible things to focus on and further develop an understanding about all these issues within this, the details between these notions. There are many different vectors of care. And now, I move from the broader to a little bit more concrete affairs, more specific ones. And we can make this roughly, it's not the only one, but some 6 broad categories. Care about oneself, about how to actualize own potential, how to express and define identity construction, how to articulate narratives of protest, narratives of oppression, narratives of opposition. There is obviously some, the politics of emancipation, if you want, are also included in this notion of self-care. And of course, it has to do with our body, biological body, and the health of our body as something that is both intrinsically, from a psychoanalytic perspective, and extrinsically, for a more traditional Marxist understanding, defined. Okay, so how our body and how our self is defined by our political environment, and again, how our body and our self is defined by our own intrinsic psychoanalytical processes. Care for the human other. How do we care for communities? How this care may serve to unify, identify, or diversify smaller or greater communities with other people, the ways in which we might communicate common ideals, common desires, common goals. Care for the human, for the more than human other. And obviously, there is the more academic perspective of this, object-oriented methodology, post-humanism, art, network theory, and how we can understand and treat other objects and things, non-human beings, as agents of some sort, as actors in a world that from a post-humanist lens we no longer understand as a world that revolves around human agency, but we rather understand ourselves as being co-constructed and co-produced and co-defined by means of an ever-going exchange of activities with other biological and non-biological beings. That's one obvious notion here. And of course, you may be aware of the latest trends in cognitive sciences, that they advocate essentially that we can pretty much talk about cognitive assemblages and also the human mind as something that is actively constructed on top of interactions between non-human entities and human entities and so on. But apart from this perspective, there are also very straightforward, practically everyday situations of advocating care towards more than human others. For instance, those of you that know me quite well might know that I have a thing with Japanese knives. And I have a rather interesting Japanese knife made from Shirogami steel number 2, if I recall correctly. So the good knives are made of carbon steel. And of course they rust. And you need to take care of them. I need to sharpen it every now and then. I need to put oil and care for it. And if I don't care for this, it will stop being a knife. It will rust. The same goes for everybody who has a musical instrument. If you have a guitar, you have to tune it. If you have a piano, you definitely have to tune it. If you don't tune your piano, after a while, it will stop being a proper piano. It's not just a question of not playing in tune, it's also questions of the entire structure. It will succumb to different kinds of tensions that it's not meant to. So caring about the objects that we use in our everyday life, depending the situation and the object, is something that is very common actually. Some people may use, how it's called, cast iron, utensils from cast iron. Again, it takes a lot of care to have such a thing. You have to make sure it's absolutely dry, because even the smallest of humidity will make it rust, and then you have to do all these things. You put some oil, you put it in the oven, and it gets sort of filled. So all these small things. In other words, we share the world with non-human entities, and as much as we care for other humans, we do exhibit care for other entities as well, non-human ones, and we should do so if we want to keep having them in our life. This also comes from lots of scientific apparatus that need constant calibration and so on, so I guess it's also relevant to your work. If you don't calibrate an instrument, it won't function correctly. Care for culture, for all these ways of producing, presenting, disseminating, publishing, archiving, restoring, rescuing, standing culture, and so on. Care for the planet. Obviously, we have a climate change you may or you may not know, but the planet is supposed to be endangered. And it's interesting because care for the planet also there are many different ways in which one can face disasters and changes on a planetary scale. And last but not least, politics of care and politics as care, which is something, again, that we very well came to realize through COVID, that there is a certain layer of policies, regulations, infrastructures, and so on that police care and ways that we can practice care, that they define and delineate the frameworks within which care can manifest. And of course, there is all this leftist heritage, socialist thinking, new socialist thinking, social democratic values, the social crisis that we face, how do you position yourself against, we still have a few more than a couple of, I'm afraid, ongoing wars. So, an important aspect of care is also how politically we are involved in this. As individuals, as societies, at the governmental level, and so on. So in short, self, human other, more than human other, and the world. And this is the four main vectors of care within our practices, but also outside of our practices, but here we are concerned mostly with our practices. And most importantly, there are a few sub-disciplines of care that are much more related to arts and culture, or there are more than the ones that I have here, but just to give a few examples, we can talk about art therapy, healthcare for artists, healthcare as art as well, which is a different thing, art as healthcare, care for the disabled, accessibility, new interfaces for disabled individuals, interfaces for social accessibility, and so on. Family care is a big issue, something that is often overlooked. Parenthood, how can you maintain a viable career as a parent within such a demanding discipline? Care and radical politics, utopic thinking, the right to think in a utopic way, socialism, techno-socialist, techno-capitalist, utopias, if there is such a thing. Curatorial practice as a form of care. We can understand the curation of an artistic event as a certain manifestation of care towards the works of art and the people involved. Of course, doing it with others, DIY and Divo. Education and workshopping aspects, what we do to share a certain know-how, a certain way of doing things with other artists, other practitioners, with the new generation. Accessibility, feminist affairs, young emerging artists. How do we make sure that all social groups and everybody, regardless of how they identify themselves and their age or their gender, that how can we make sure that they have the same access to resources to make and to distribute and to talk about their art? Can we think about art beyond commodity? Can we talk about artistic practice that it's not meant to be sold and bought as some kind of a product? That's another very interesting aspect. Pandemic, crisis aesthetics, how we have artistic practices and works that reflect on crises, on pandemics, on disasters. Data care, who cares for our hyper selves? Bias in AI algorithms, the new colonial reality where the big companies and the powerful of this world, they use our data to shape a future world with limited representation for smaller countries, for smaller cultural contexts, and so on, and we are already experiencing this. You won't easily find text-to-image pipeline that works well in Turkish, but you will find one that works pretty well in English. So this is indicative of the future to come and what companies have in mind about certain contexts. It's not just language, certain context, you know, and certain place in the world. I called all these off-centers, but I'll come back to this in a while. So an ethics of care, in a nutshell, could revolve around attention, affection, recognition, respect, commitment, trust, and honesty. And what is important to understand is that each of these qualities can be present, but it can also be absent from an artistic practice. So what we are doing in this project is that we kind of think a little bit about all of this. We position ourselves amidst this landscape, which obviously is not something we can exhaust in a couple of years or so. It's something that concerns our lives in very important ways. So what we do with Toolkit of Care is that essentially we try to implement, in the end of the project, a certain kind of toolkit with comprising of ways and a roadmap maybe of how creative practitioners and institutions can find their way and practice care for one another, share resources and so on. And we kind of focus on a few very specific vectors. There are more vectors that we could possibly be involved with. It's not that we exclude others, it's just that at the moment this is the main focus and this is what we can primarily support. But we are very open actually, and we have allowed a few other, if we have applications and interesting individuals in working groups that could be possibly be involved, that we can expand this array of vectors. It's possible to add more things here. So one of the main things that we do is provide care for young artists and researchers. How we do that? We provide grants actually. So every year we give around 4 2 dissemination and 2 ITC grants, but in a recent void we have changed that so that we can actually change a little bit the way that these are distributed. We can give up to 4 grants per year to young researchers to travel around and present their work in a conference or in a festival. And we also have a number of, we call them short-term scientific missions, that's how COST calls them actually. For those in the art system, we normally call these things artistic residencies. In COST terminology, they are short-term scientific missions, and last year we gave, then I think it was 5, right? Yeah, 5 of those residencies, and we gave the opportunity to artists to travel in another country and work there and develop a new work of art. This is fully funded again, so it's also a way for people to access resources and be paid for, and also they can distribute the money either for production or for production expenses or for their labor and so on. This is a very important aspect, the way that I personally relate to this project, this idea of off-centeredness. By off-centers here, I mean contexts that are not central to the way that the world is at the moment structured. Okay. Weak countries, post-colonial realities, non-urban territories, non-major uncertainties, the global south, the global east, and so on. And speaking very very similar at this moment. I mean, I had this conversation with probably with a few of you in the past, but think about it for a moment. Like Mika, for instance, he's from Lithuania, and I'm from Greece. But the chances are that it didn't happen in our case, but the chances are that, we would came to meet in London or New York, and then came to collaborate. So the thing is that currently, that the way the world is structured, culture gets mediated from a certain central node. You have, something happens in Tate Modern, something happens in MoMA, and then smaller countries and smaller territories look at what happens in the major centers, and they try to either imitate or learn from it. And then you have this weird situation. For instance, yesterday I was in Bulgaria, and I have some colleagues in the Balkans, and it always revolves around this thing. Okay, how can it be that Greece, Cyprus, Bulgaria, Turkey, Serbia, North Macedonia, Montenegro, all these countries are not at all well connected with one another? I've met with these people, I like this colleague of mine, Anthony, that we work together. They're also part of the project through Gallia. We've met in Paris, in Nantes actually, or in Paris, and we came to meet one another and exchange practices through the mediation of some Western art center. And again, here we are not trying to re-establish an anti-colonial perspective where we blame the colonialist West about all the problems it has caused, and we try to get out of it, and abolish. We are not talking about something like this. I'm actually talking more about the fact that it goes both ways. Of centers, there is a certain know-how, and there is a certain different way of seeing the world if you are from an off-center and you work in an off-center. And again, off-centers are not necessarily geographical. Okay, off-centers could be that you are in a certain micro-community that relates with your gender or with your language or with your with something else. So off-center is essentially smaller ecosystem. So the reality of such an ecosystem comes with a certain way of seeing the world. And I think that it's very beneficial for everybody, major senders included, to be able to expose themselves to these different perspectives, these different ways of seeing the world. I think it's beneficial. And of course, where we don't want a situation where the off-centers remain detached from the rest of the world. So essentially, in simple words, care for off-centers translates to two different things, very practically speaking. One is the possibility of hosting activities in off-centers and allow unmediated access from individuals coming from other off-centers. So you have an activity, for instance, in Rijeka in Croatia, and you can have people traveling directly from Greece or Cyprus or Montenegro and go in there without the mediation of some institute like the Goethe Institute or, I don't know, some other institute that typically has the resources to fund such a situation. Unmediated mobilities through off-centers so that we are given a chance to show other off-centers the way that we do things in a particular off-centers and share and exchange know-how, practices, understandings, and so on. And the other perspective is twofold, to also be able to present these off-center realities to the major centers and vice versa. And again, this is interesting because if you have the opportunity, like how many, I don't know, artists travel from Montenegro to New York to present their work? Probably a few, but who controls who are these few? So this kind of questions, by giving grants for mobilities, you can fund mobilities and you can fund our activities. So what we do essentially to this respect is that we try to have lots of activities going on in smaller places, in smaller countries, and invite people to commute between, to go there essentially and get to know how things are done in a different fashion over there. This year we did events in Limassol, Athens, Rijeka, Nantes, Weimar, Paris, where else? It's a little bit misleading because it's actually 2 events in Limassol and I think 2 events in Athens, one I think in Corinth, and a small village which is next to Sparta, but it's like up in the mountains, so we also did a thing there. We had also some residencies in Limassol, Nantes, where else? I don't remember. No. Next year we are having residencies and events in Sofia, Rijeka, Valletta in Malta, Tokyo in Japan, Montreal, Limassol, Selassie again, Sparta, don't remember, Vilnius, don't remember where else. So this is the idea. Here for don't privilege other, females, queer, non-binary, non-Western individuals and so on. We have established some rather strict policies. I have the data in another folder I can show you, but the goal is that in all events and throughout everything we do, we have 50% of female participation and at least 40% of young researchers. And something that is important for the project, but not necessarily demographically speaking, we also want 20% of the participants to be other organizers, because essentially we want to establish a network of care, and you can't have a network if people just go there, attend once and leave. So the people who are a little bit more involved are also supposed not just to organize something, but to also attend an event organized by others in another country. Here for radical thinkers and thinkers, we are proudly non-solutionist and experimentalists. And of course, there are many ways to do things, and you could have more projects here, but our particular thing is experimental arts, experimental crafts, DIY, Devo practices, speculative practices, critical design, fiction, media archaeology, and all sorts of other non-dominant ways to experiment with materials and practices. Archiving and publishing care is very important in the group, because if there is not a way to somehow archive all this work and all these practices, then this project is of no use to anyone but the ones who participate in it. What we want to do is to eventually arrive at a toolkit of care, which will comprise all this selection of this material, blueprints, prototype work, original artistic work, theoretical essays, workshop material, minutes and so on, that could be of possible use by others. And by archive here, we don't refer to a static archive. The way to understand the archives is again processual. And people like Julien know that pretty well. They have their own archiving, their own practice, and they always go back in their archive and they seek for things they change and then use it again. So this kind of understanding of archives as something which is ever produced here and now, in every here and now, is something that we want to find ways of implementing in our project. So we have an entire working group that goes in this direction, how to have meaningful archives, how we can publish and archive all this body of work in fashions that can be used by others, can be reused, appropriated, changed, and so on. So I have 4 working groups. I guess some of you are already in some working group. Sharing care mostly focuses on workshops, training schools, and ways to do things, crafts, DIY, Devo workshops, and so on. It's led by Mindavas here, who is the working group leader of this group. And we had quite some activity last year in this group. We did quite a few different workshops and training schools in this group, including a conference that we did in Weimar. That was a pretty big event. Then we have here in visual and performing arts. This is led by Josephine Lindrecht, which is not here with us today. We have a lot of activities next year in this group. Obviously, this is about more performative, more artistic, purely artistic events, exhibitions, performances, live music, experimental arts of any kind, and so on. Analysis theory and politics of care is led by Alessandro Ludovico. And revolves, sorry, it's not by Alessandro Ludovico. The publishing and archival care is led by Alessandro Ludovico. And it deals a lot with archives, what I was briefly referring to just now, how to publish and how to archive care in fashions that are meaningful and that we can also leave a footprint for the others to follow. There is not much of work going on in this working group at the moment for an obvious reason. We first need to do some activities so that we can have all the material we need to start experimenting with archives. We have done a couple of things, just a workshop about sound walks and how we can work around this. But there is more work to come also next year. For next year, we also have a small budget for print experiments, and we see how it goes. And last but not least, we have analysis, theory, and politics of care, which is led by two co-leaders, Davor Miskovic and Valeria Gracianu from the Drugo More organization in Croatia. Drugo More means the other sea. I think it's very poetic. And this group revolves around more theoretical perspectives and this kind of analysis, what is care, and all these more theoretical aspects of the implications, which is something very important to our group. I won't talk a lot about this now. We've done a few things like a round table and a few other things this year, and there is more to happen next year. But just to very quickly say that an important aspect of this group is also how to include in this discussion people who have some power, people who make policies, people who are into politics, people who have the muscle to maybe influence a few things in the future. We have some rough ideas, false of things that will happen. I have to say that we are not particularly successful at this end. I tried a lot last year to invite people from the European Union, the Commission, to attend one of our events so that we can immediately talk with them. Then I found out that nobody would answer my phones for lots of time. And then I realized that apparently I was told by some kind of insider in Brussels that, sometimes there is nobody there. They just have the office and they stay in their own country, like in Italy or in Greece, and they just have a phone number that nobody answers. Especially after the pandemic, this is a very common practice. But I did get lots of training myself in Brussels from the Coast Association. I have to say that it's a very, not my kind of thing to easily survive this kind of sessions, but I have to say that I learned quite a few things, and this is very useful in actually identify who you should contact, who you should talk with. These are very complex organizations, and understanding the structure of how they work is super important, because at least I know who are the people that we'd like to get in touch with, regardless of whether they answer the phone calls or not. Yeah, I have a video here. Sorry that I've been talking for so long. I have a video here with, there are the lights. This is just significantly
maybe they can clap their hands.
What's this?
Close lights.
There's
Something on the
remote
table.
control over there.
Ah, yeah, it's here. Clock set. No.
Also on the table there's a control. It's probably for the window.
No, this is for the project.
Just behind you, what
It's
is
okay,
this?
I
This
mean-
square? This square just behind you?
Ah. Okay, doesn't matter. The guy who assembled this video is much more interested in the theoretical aspects of our project. And I think you can see that in the video, that for its greatest part, these people speaking about here and so on. This is a little bit misleading, because in reality, we've also done artistic activities, residencies, and so on, so there is a lot more creative work going on. It's not here, partly because the major interest of Yannis has been other aspects of the project, and partly because by the time that we made this promo video, some of the residencies were not yet concluded. This is around 7 minutes, and after that, maybe we can
Make a break and talk on it. That's okay. You lost the sound. What?
From a really wide-angle lens, some ways of thinking about care and art, and then really open it up. I by no means think that these are exhaustive, and I'm sure many of you will look to add to these lists or to poke holes at the sort of taxonomy. I think there's some value in a large project which does have folks who work in so many places, and so many media, with so many histories of production and histories of aesthetics, to try to map out where we're coming from and see where there's both overlap and where there's room for adding to the kind of theoretical vocabulary and practices that we employ.
I'll take us first through the hoops of how we define care. In the most general sense, care is a species activity that includes everything we do to maintain, continue, and repair our world so that we may live in it as well as possible. The world includes our bodies, ourselves, and our environment, all of which we seek to interweave in a complex, life-sustaining web. This is a quote from John Tronto and Bernice Fisher.
So one thing that I find is sometimes confusing in discussions of care, and particularly discussions of care in the context of art production, is what is the relationship or relationships one is talking about, right? And I think there are a number of vectors of care you might articulate.
Here's another take by Dave Graeber. If you think about it, is that not what life is basically about? Human beings are projects of mutual creation. Most of the work we do is on each other. The working classes just do a disproportionate share. They are the caring classes and always have been. Throughout our lives, we depend on the support of our families, friends, strangers, and institutions to sustain ourselves and to sustain the world in which we and the future generations have to live. That interdependency of humans and non-human nature in social and ecological reproduction defines the relations of care. And the effort to sustain those relations defines the labor of care.
That's me, by the way.
But perhaps, on the topic of care, what is more important is that it sacrifices our present well-being. These state sacrifices our present well-being for a promise of the future that may or may not materialize.
But a big thrust of the work that I'm interested in is to extend the collective sense-making practice beyond methods and body understanding to include broader socio-technical challenges.
So there's a distinct question, is how can the art outputs of collectives not only be created with care in mind, but somehow model care and perhaps new modalities of care?
Friendship is it's a kind of motivation to care for people who might be who might have different needs, different conditions. It motivates us to use our resourcefulness to really think about how we can create shared well-being.
How do we care for the cultural sector, for cultural collectives? Because actually it's really hard to care for others when we are in this framework of these very short-term projects, when you put this into the context of other people's lives.
When we look at our experience with data, it is isolating. It is not really something we talk about unless something has gone terribly wrong, in which case there's a degree of profound doubt or uncertainty. And so in that sense, the purpose of all this is to create language and to provide discursive tools that people can draw on that aren't rooted in oh, everything is wrong, everything is broken, I don't know what happened, I need help to understand this, but rather as also creative practice and a practice of collective curiosity.
What principles or guidelines could be created for a toolkit of care? That's the goal of this project. We literally conceive of the toolkit as a thing, right? As a thing that will exist, that folks could make use of and ask how it might be employable in their own practices.
The last guy talking is actually our scientific officer, so he's also part. I just mentioned some key figures so that you know some key figures in the process. And the other key person that it was only for a few seconds there, but she's actually super important for the project, is my research assistant, Alexia Hileos, and she's the key person for everything cost-related, actually. In certain things, she knows everything. Certainly much more than I do. And just a very quick note, because sometimes, it's not always evident why all this is about. A couple of weeks ago, I also gave a performance with Dimitri, the guy who did this performance with the hydrophones and the water. And he was explaining that actually his work originated in his concern about sub-water life, and the fact that there is lots of noise from sea guns and so on, that they produce problems with fish and whales and so on. So anyhow, this is also an artistic response, his own way of caring about a very specific ecological affair. I guess, this box, this is what I was thinking, I was looking at the clock. So, okay, I guess that I'm going to also present you this box, and then we can have maybe a break for a good coffee, and we'll come back and we can maybe talk a little bit about this and get to know one another. We see how it works out, maybe all of us or in smaller groups. I guess that there might be questions towards me, and I really urge you, if you have any questions for me, to make them questions for everybody. That would be also easier for me. Not that I have a problem in answering, but I think it's more democratic. Now, but before I go into this box, you all need to sign this attendance list, which is somewhere, yeah. So make sure that you have signed here, else you won't get everybody. Else you won't pay. No signature, no reimbursement. So make sure you sign. So, other than the main, again, just to make a very quick summary, like the kind of things we do with Toolkit of Care, boils down to 3-4 main categories. Grants for young researchers and for people from our group that want to talk about, that go somewhere to talk about something related to the project. Grants for short-term scientific missions, so to have researchers travel in another country, another research lab, and stay there and work for some period of time. We have what the cost calls meetings. Well, meetings essentially is very broad, so what we do now is also a meeting. We are a little bit more specific about this, so we do workshops, dissemination workshops that mostly target local audiences. So the idea is that we have 2 or 3 people come from a place, but we mostly target the local audience. So for instance, we will do one of these workshops in my lab next year sometime, where we have 2 artists invited to present a workshop for our students. So they target local audiences. So we have workshops of this sort. We have workshops that are a little bit more international. So people gather there and they exchange practices and they work together. We have meetings that they mostly have this form. talks and discussion round tables. This mostly happen in working group 3. We have a conference that we do every year. We experiment a little bit with the idea. Last year it was in Weimar, it was a rather big thing. The next year it will be smaller, it will take place in Montreal, and it will have the form of a consecutive training school that spreads over several days. So the other main category of events is training schools. Well, training school is essentially something like workshops. It's a different category at their cost because different rules apply. I guess the main difference, practically speaking, is that in training school you are supposed to have some trainer, or more than one trainer, and some people that are trained. There is also a small budget depending on the year that goes for dissemination and communication, the website, making these videos and so on. But this is just a very small amount of the budget. And all these things are associated with a few deliverables. Now this is not a technical meeting, I don't want to get into administrative details. The thing though which is important for everybody to know is that out of all these events, there is always something that is delivered. Reports, almost always, notes, minutes. Very often we have like prototypes, things like creative outputs, code, scores, notes, schematics, and all these that we will figure out later what to do. And we have also created a few extra deliverables. One of those is this. I guess that in the last meeting, if I recall correctly, we agreed that this will be the roadmap of care. So one of the deliverables that we had to do was that we had to deliver the roadmap of care. Okay, but what's the roadmap of care? We thought a little bit about, what form could the roadmap of care have. And then we decided, because this is something that we had already experimented with in different contexts. We have experimented with this idea in another project I'm involved, but also in some of my lessons. I guess it's very much inspired by a project carried out by the Fab Lab in Barcelona. And they call this thing Atlas of Weak Signals. I don't know if you happen to know this thing. So essentially, the original Atlas of Weak Signals is a game of cards meant to trigger and initiate discussion about things. You can play that in many different ways. So inspired by this, we came up. This is the first prototype. Nobody has ever seen that around this group but me and the guy who printed it, so it's new. It's the first prototype of the Atlas of Care.
I have seen it.
You have seen it, but
I've seen it before. It's playing.
But this is real.
Yeah, but I have a question. So it is very generous, to support activities, to support young people, researchers. They travel to give grants, but how to make it more sustainable? Because the project will last for, let's say, 4 or 5 years, right?
If you have any ideas, I have some ideas, but that's a very serious. I have some ideas.
It's a question of care.
Yeah, it's very important. It's actually part of what we do. I can right away give you a few ideas. One of the things that I've been thinking of is that gradually you may be considering developing something like, a white paper, or how do they call these things, like, a white paper or something. So it could be, let's say, not like manifestos, but more like, a series of guidelines of what it takes for an activity or a practice to be deemed as adopting a caring, an aesthetics of care, a toolkit of care, whatever perspective. So the idea is that you have a white paper like this, then we can let the world know about it, and we can ask people to adhere to this document, so that hopefully we have, media, electronic, other curators, of course, we have to support it, other galleries, spaces, curators, to kind of declare that, okay, we adhere to this document, and this means that from now on, if we do something, we basically follow this kind of rules so that we make sure that we have 50% females, 50% males, for instance, young researcher representation, that we do our best to represent all centers and so on. That's one idea that I have, and it's open to discussion. Obviously, another idea that I have, but this can go on forever, is that when the project is towards its end, we can seek for more funding to extend it. I'm an academic, I think like this. It's part of my job. I have to think like this. But yeah, this can go on forever. But I think that there is potential in this project, especially through all the work that we will be doing. I'm open to more suggestions, but that's very important to make sure that we for some people it's a question of survival, actually. It's a pretty serious matter.
In the UK, for example, alumni of universities, they often donate money to the universities. So maybe it could be a possibility to kind of establish something like this, where people could transfer.
Good luck establishing that in Greece, for instance. This is the thing. I mean, you can establish that maybe in Germany, but can you establish that in Montenegro, or like in Greece? This is the thing.
Even if
so I will leave this and you can. This is our Atlas of Care. It's a game of cards. And there are some instructions also, but the main idea is that you start with something, with a question related with care and maybe more specific about your practice or something. And there are different categories in the cards, and these are meant to trigger discussion and reflection on some particular perspective. So for instance, you take this, policy. So how does what you've been thinking about relate to policy or to the Second World War? There are some very provocative ones, migration, Middle East, indigenous. These are random triggers. There are others that are meant to be, vectors of care for the oceans. Care, self-care,
And
there are rules,
rules in order to play.
There are rules, but the rules are very flexible. So the main rule is that you have 4 different categories of cards, the 4 being the empty cards. Okay, and we normally use a big paper so that we can keep notes. And we start with something and we say, okay, we're about to make, like you have a question. We call it a fight, but last time that we called it a fight, people couldn't relate with that, so let's not call it a fight. Let's say that you have like a focus. It could be an exhibition you're about to do, or it could be that you're curious to see how your practice, which might be into working with textiles, how does that relate with care? So you start with this topic, and then you say, okay, how does it relate with care, this, and after a while, you grab like a card, and it may be or may not be relevant. Equality. So how does practicing textile design brings forth or relates with equality? And you maybe think a little about that, and you make some notes, and then you grab another. Care for algorithms. Does that relate to algorithms? Actually it does. I have done some work with algorithmic textile generation. And there are also the random triggers. So you get things like vintage. The random triggers are meant, it's a different category of cards, and these are meant kind of to move you in an entirely different direction. War, parents, cyberpunk, communism, Instagram. And the last category is weak signals. So this is things like AI, machine learning, social innovation, carbon neutral, nice lifestyle, gender equality. So this is more specific things you should relate they're kind of more like opportunities, so to say, of application of what you do. Anyway, have a look, all of you. Don't write anything also. The hardie. That's good. It's a good hardie. And this is Riso printed. It's a Japanese machine called Riso. and it makes something that is very close to silk screen printing. So essentially something between a printer and the silk screen process. It creates a film and then puts ink on the film, and then it just presses it the way a silk screen would do, and it creates this particular event. A colleague at the university is obsessed with this, so I have access to. Yeah, he helped me a lot with this. And we can have a break now, I guess, and there is coffee outside, and we can continue. And there is the final, the dinner is at 8.
The graphic.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's very like.
Εντάξει, αυτό έχω σκεφτεί και είδα εντάξει, το άλλο πράγμα, αυτό που έτσι, το πιέζει πάρα πολύ. Όλους τους να θέλουμε ρε παιδί μας αυτό το με κάποιο τρόπο να επηρεάσουμε το policy making σε επίπεδο κομμουνιστών. Εντάξει,
τώρα εσύ είπες να το μπορέσει, μπορεί να στήσουμε
δεν είναι αυτό, μα είναι το θέμα τώρα και για το project. Όταν μπορείς να κάνει ένα project με τα κρατικούς υπολογιστές, ας πούμε, αυτός μπορεί να το επηρεάσει. Δηλαδή, κατάλαβες, δηλαδή είμαστε εκεί, ξέρω εγώ, δηλαδή I guess maybe we'll continue the discussions we have outside and here.
Yes,
Like,
of course.
anyone want to draw a topic more specific? I guess all of you have notes. Maybe there is something specific with your interests that you want to report and talk a little bit about, or if not, we can start from the open question, but just to make sure first.
Is a question of clarification, because I want to hear a little bit more, or at least a repetition of the possible, not outputs, but what are the types of events that could be organized. You said something about grants for young researchers and members of the COST, if I'm right or not?
Okay, so we have three types of grants.
Okay.
Short-term scientific missions are grants for, we open this every year. Okay, so it's the responsibility of this institution that accept people to kind of set up a framework for what exactly they need. Most typically, they are about the production of a new art piece, but it looks something else. Then we also have grants that are about, sorry, just this thing. We also have grants that are about, not necessarily people from the committee, sorry, not necessarily people from the committee, it could be anyone, both types of grants. These are types of grants that are called dissemination grants. It's technically for somebody to go and present a paper or a talk or give a talk or it's a conference or something, but it has to be somehow related to the project. And then there is another kind of grant, and this doesn't have to be even related to the project. We can give it to anybody. But they have to be from an ITC company. Okay, now what is an ITC company? It's a certain list of, I apologize for this. This is super impolite in Asia, but I think in Greece it's okay. I think I'm not sure. There is a certain list of countries that the coast thinks that they are in need of money, I guess. Greece is in this list. So it's Greece, Cyprus, it's, I guess the small countries of Europe mostly. And a few other, again, it's very political. The thing with cost is very political. So there are different rules into effect depending, small differences, but somehow they're important. So you have like the cost member countries, the near neighboring countries, the ITC countries, some other countries that I don't remember how they are called, and it's just South Africa and the States, I think, and the rest of the world. And there is different things into effect about all this. So dissemination grants are for coast countries and near neighboring countries. And ITC grants is for ITC countries alone. Small countries generally are there. And there are also some exclusions. Russia, Belarus, and Hungary, as of lately, they are excluded for political reasons. Also Hungary.
Wow.
Yeah. It's a very...
From where?
Eh?
From where in Hungary?
From where in Hungary?
Yes, it's excluded.
From this project.
For the beginning.
You mean from
No,
the cost?
From the cost.
It was added
Yes,
later.
yeah, I think this is
The cost decided since a month or so that they are actually they sustain and they suspend every collaboration with people from Hungary. And we have actually some people in the management committee from Hungary. We don't know for how long. So anyhow, there is a layer of, a rather thick layer of politics in the way cost is implemented, and we have to deal with it and be aware of the, because of there are things
What if
that
they're,
normalize the political implications of the project.
What if their project big?
Spend.
Oh, okay.
And about Slovakia?
Slovakia is okay for now.
Well, the fourth other part.
For now. And we also had the thing with Turkey. I mean, I'm afraid, maybe I shouldn't openly talk about this, but, I think I should talk. We had selected an artist from Turkey to participate in an activity of ours. And the Greek consulate in Istanbul, they denied her the visa. Yeah, and we reapplied. Yeah, to come here and we reapplied, and they denied again. And then I made a formal appeal, complaining that how can you deny visa to an artist since Turkey is a cost member country, and we have selected, formally that this particular person should attend this project, but yeah, they didn't answer, never to me. But I have to say that I was pretty angry for this country. That I mean, it's entirely not a form of care. Exclude. Yes. Anyhow, there is a layer of politics in this.
So how, the grants, and you said also meetings.
Yeah, this is the other thing. Now, technically, so it's the grants. Then technically, we have cost and codes to different categories. Meetings and training schools.
Okay.
For our purposes, you can think of them as the same. There are technical differences. Okay, from what countries could the participants be? So for instance, you can invite somebody from the States to come here as a trainer in a training school once in a lifetime of a project. But you can invite them to get into a meeting. You don't have to bother about all this, okay? This is super complicated. There is a book like this. Alexia knows it by heart. I don't know it by heart, but I have to read it quite often. The work group leaders are supposed to know it by heart, but nobody has ever read it. So yeah, just ask me or Alexia, and we will tell you what is possible and not, because it's like technical differences. But essentially what we generally found, and the way it works, is that it's the job of the work group leaders. Again, the work group leaders is Nika for the sharing care working group, Josephine for the visual and visual arts and performance working group, Valeria and Davor for the analysis, politics and theory of care working groups. So to them you should direct all your concerns about politics. And it's Alessandro Ludovico, who is responsible for the publishing the archiving care working group. Now it's the job of these working groups and the working group meetings that happen to identify people who could potentially organize events, discuss with them, and in the end of sometimes toward the end of the year, they send their proposed plan, their suggestions, and also we have the initial project application that features a detailed list of events for each year. So I confirm with all these people, if they are still interested and so on. Anyhow, so towards the summertime, all these arrive to the core of the core group, which is me, Jenny, and Alexia essentially. And we try to see what can happen, what is possible, to fit into the budget for the next year, and then cost comes and tell us what is the budget of the next year. And again, try to see what is possible and also align with the project and so on. And then we assemble the work and budget plan for the next year. This has to be approved and voted by the management committee, and then controlled by cost. Typically, the cost returns that for some changes, and then it's approved by cost, and then people from my university, they have to sign some papers, and then it's okay. So yeah, it's very technical. It's a very administrative talking. It's a super heavy project to manage. Okay, so you shouldn't be too much concerned about all this. Just bear in mind that there is a layer of very thick administration going on in all respect. So to go back to your question, Penny, meetings and training schools, you can think of it as the same thing. Essentially, we just like to organize either artistically concerned events, that is exhibitions, performances, things of the sort, or events that are more hybrid, that combine that kind of activities with discussion, and maybe events that are pure discussion, presentations, and maybe a bit more academic. And a big deal of workshops. Workshops that are either target the local audiences or that are meant to bring together people from different places so that they collaborate and they work together towards the production of new methodologies of thinking and doing things. So these are the categories mostly that we do, but we're very open to other things. Well, we have a fixed structure, so every year we strive for one conference and one round table. The round table is part of the working group. It's more or less like this. And the conference, yeah, it's a conference. Criticism, concerns, things to discuss maybe, ideas, suggestions. Ways you could see yourself involved in the project.
Are there some specific goals, some target that as mariners you want or expect to be met?
For an event or for the entire project?
For the entire project. Somehow you have a vision, something like that.
Yeah, we have. I mean, I also have a list with 13 goals that I can read from the goals, but we probably don't ask about this. No, the goal essentially is, I guess, to formulate a network, which is what we're doing at the moment. And hopefully this network, we want it to be sustained and form the basis of a continuation of these practices, in the spirit of, again, joining of centers with one another and providing opportunities for artists and so on to collaborate and do things. The toolkit of care is meant to be a toolkit, so that it's like an array of methods that would help people organize at that kind of communities. So somehow, to realize ourselves what it takes, and also to share the practical means of how to do it.
If you talk about toolkit, is it like physical toolkit, a collection of different tools, or is it a recommendation, a list of recommendations how to make a toolkit?
I guess all of these things. Like this, for instance, is part of the toolkit. So you have something which is part of the toolkit. I'm a very processual person generally. I don't like, I like processes. So this is part of the toolkit. This is one of the things that, okay, you can use this as a tool for a very specific things. You can use it to direct, trigger discussion and, avoid the situation where you don't know how to continue the discussion. And you can think of it, as something for a particular, as a solution to a certain problem. We have other tools in in mind, like very straightforwardly. And I think this is also something that also the people who work in the project, we get so much concerned with how to prove that what we do is about care that we forget something important. Care, practically speaking, is to sometimes offer something to somebody else. Okay, the technicalities of this something are not to be considered also. So if I want to care my knife and I need to sharpen it, so the sharpening stone is a very important tool that concerns how to care for this object. Now in our case, me, Mika, Zulen, we all are also, well, maybe safekeepers is a very heavy word, but anyhow, we know how to do, technically speaking, lots of things, electronics, coding, programming, working with biomaterial, this is important knowledge and know-how. And I envision this to be also part of the toolkit. So somebody wants to run workshops in India about, bioart. You can refer to the toolkit and you can find materials, tools, technical knowledge and prototypes on how to actually do such a workshop. But I think this is important because collectively, at least the people who are the main partners who are behind, writing this application, we cover a lot of things. DIY electronics, DIY code, DIY instruments, DIY biotechnologies. So if you combine all these, pretty much they cover a wide array of what it takes to practically make media arts. So this is enough. It will be enough in the toolkit of care for some networking, some off-center to get started, writing their own codes, making their own, mycelium networks of producing weird noises and whatever weird other things. That's another important aspect.
Do we have the topic of the next conference, so we can?
The topic not yet, I'm afraid. It will happen around September, probably, or August. It's too early, and the key person for this is Eric. But what we have in mind,
Which working group will it be related to?
All of them, technically.
Is that in Montreal?
It's Montreal, yeah.
September 2020.
Probably September, yeah. And Eric, that's another technicality with cost. We're always talking about affiliations, not where you stay or live. Okay, so Eric, he works in McGill University in Canada, in Montreal. But he's affiliated with an organization here in Greece. So all he does in cost is under this umbrella of his Greek affiliation. Because technically he can't be affiliated to cost through the McGill University. But this conference, we will conference assortment of training school to be correct, because it will be training schools. This will take place in McGill University probably, and there are some discussions. I guess like one obvious thing to do is try to also involve Concordia. And in Concordia they have Erin Manning, which is a pretty big name in certain things. I don't know how well they are with Eric's team and how they work together, but we have already very, superficially talking about inviting that group over there, and they also run the Three Ecologies Network, which they have some structure, working with rather similar things. The Three Ecology Network, which is part of another thing that I don't remember how it's called, but they pretty much revolve around working, care, communities, relation with the environment and so on. And the other people we would probably like to get in touch with and involve in this, there is a pretty famous self-organized community of people, and it's called Casa del Popolo, the house of the people. This is a very historical thing in Montreal, and they also have a space. You might know, Casa del Popolo was run by the same people, or anyhow they were related with these people that had this rather famous group in the late 90s, early 2000s, Godspeed You Black Emperor. So these people are related with the Casa del Popolo, and they are very much into community work and such, and they also have a venue which is called La Sala Rosa. And Eric is also part of the Casa del Popolo. He's one of the people running Casa del Popolo alongside with somebody else. And it's very useful because under his umbrella, so he works in McGill, he's also part of La Casa del Popolo, and they have some relationship with Concordia, so I guess that the working, at the moment the working hypothesis is that we will be able somehow to involve all those people, so that we go there and we achieve this kind of bringing of centers in touch with at least 3 different ways of doing things over there in Canada. It's interesting that something which is entirely non-European in the way of thinking. I mean, I get that some of you have already fired and run projects in the European Union, and we all know that when it comes to writing a proposal or justifying how you use your money, they are super, super interesting and sensitive on how you have used your money with respect to gender equality and things like that. Now, in the other side of the Atlantic, they are super sensitive with other things that are entirely absent here, like indigenous cultures. So this is a very big thing for them. Okay, and it's something that it's interesting also to reflect on how different, they have a different understanding of inequalities. In Canada, for instance, like homosexuality, and gender inequalities is not that much of a problem as it is in Europe, I guess, I don't know, I can't be sure, but
this resembles to the community in Copenhagen.
You talk about Canada, about Montreal?
Yes.
Because there is a huge issue with the oil. What is the
oil?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
That it's a,
the pipeline,
as a genocide is their position in the Canadian society.
They have a long history of conflicts, with the indigenous population.
It is huge. You have to, every year, to go to the authorities and declare where you are working off, even if you are a third, fourth generation. Right now.
But what is interesting is that when you formally, in the universities, in a formal application and stuff, they are required to provide evidence that they have taken into account, what kind of affairs, while we don't. So if we do something there, I think that another aspect that, again, I don't know, we have to discuss with Eric what's his plan, is that maybe we should try to involve somehow a discussion or some activities or something that relate with this particular aspect of the society there, indigenous communities. Or maybe what Nikos talks about, because I am aware of this long ongoing conflict with the oil industry and so on.
I have a very basic question because it's my first time here, and I don't know if I'm taking up time with that, but how do you get involved, like with your group, and how do you work together with them? Do you contact them and propose something or talk to them about what you do, or do they get virtual meetings to do like workshops?
The way that we work at the moment is like this. It's still the first year and not everything works the way it should. But we have template, we have a pipeline of some things are supposed to work. So ideally, there are the work group leaders. The work group leaders liaise with the organizers that are supposed to do events on their working group. Okay. so as to help them organize the event. All the events that we do in the working groups throughout the course, they're advertised to the working groups that are of relevance. So if you are, for instance, in working group 2 and there is something going on in 2 months in working group 2, you will certainly be notified that this happens. And there is always like an open call for people who are interested to participate in this. It's up to the organizers to decide for its greatest part. We can discuss things with the work group leaders, can discuss maybe suggest people and such, but it's always up to the organizers to decide who will be invited in the working group. Typically and practically, there are some, I mean, an organizer, if he's doing something, they probably already have a few people in mind that should talk and relate, but not always. And then people can also go there just to attend. And they make these decisions based on the budget and the rules. 50% women, 50% young researchers, 20% of their organizers, and something else that I don't remember.
That's 120%.
Who is young?
Young, okay. That's something that pisses me off a lot, because with their definitions, I'm absolutely not young anymore.
But you're not.
I'm young.
It's not about age.
Come on,
it's
you
about
know.
status of research.
State of intelligence.
With young researchers, it has nothing to do with age.
Exactly.
It has to do with the state of your research.
I'm sorry.
And the years after their PhD.
I'm
Yeah,
sorry
exactly.
to falsify you, but you are actually wrong.
We had a
for cost
conversation, yes.
For cost,
for cost
it's
and
40.
Yeah, okay.
We already
If you are
have this
40
debate.
years old.
We had this debate and
okay, that's it.
it's costs.
So yeah.
So you have to be young.
No, it's costs.
Last time you were young, the dance of the ruling the earth.
So if you say you do research and you are 55 and you are having your PhD at 55, you are a young researcher, but for cost you
No,
old.
for cost you're
Yeah, okay.
That's it.
I will know.
Anyhow, so this
There's
is a
no
serious
debate,
question.
of course.
It's a very basic and important question. So the thing is that yeah, they follow the rules, and of course there are suggestions. I mean, typically if somebody from the core committee wants to join the group and attend the group, because all these people are working very hard, you know, and they should travel around also to make sure that they correctly administrate the activity. So the people from the core group committee, typically they may attend, you know, such events, or somebody, you know, an organizer may be doing an event and they want this particular people to be there. So this is like, these people will probably end up there as long as it's okay with the rules. Some other people will be selected from the open call. Depending the event, it could be 1 or 2. And it could be that someone, you know, maybe the scientific communication scientific officer, you know, also goes there to make sure, especially if it's a new organizer, that the activity is organized correctly, that they properly document everything and so on. So if it's a new organizer, typically somebody from the core group will also go there as well to make sure, you know, that the things are going well. And we do want to make sure, in order to have a community and not just random events going on, there has to be some circulation. So that people who have participated at some point are expected to also go somewhere else, and there is no point. Now that's one layer. So essentially, if you're in a working group, what you do is that you will get emails about any activity that is happening at some point, and you can apply. You should also get emails about the working group meetings that happen 3 or 4 times per year, depending on the working groups, where people gather and they discuss what has happened, you know, if they have ideas and such. Currently, I have to say that there is not much going on in this front. There have been a few meetings, but you know, we typically have been in a working group with 25 members, and it's just like 4 people. So yeah, I mean, if you have the opportunity, it's nice so that people know who you are. We won't always have the opportunity of something like this where we get to know one another. You can attend working groups and propose things. And then, if you happen to also want to organize something and you know think that you want to do something, you can take some responsibility as an organizer. You discuss that with the work group leaders. It's a very important part of what they do, to kind of come up with suggestions higher up of what should be included in next year working plan. So yeah, that's how it works. And then the part of me, Alexia, Jenny, and the kind of the core group comes above all this. So we are not normally directly involved on who will attend, an activity. They are supposed to send us the final list, make sure that everything is in place, and maybe say, okay, something, these particular things, this person would also fit, so consider taking also this person, maybe something like this, but we don't directly control who will participate. We just make sure that the rules are followed.
No, I think I follow from Stan. It's a matter of how do we contact the working group leaders? Because supposedly I am in one, but I've never got an email about the meetings where...
Yeah, I've had this complaint from at least another person.
We had that outside,
yeah,
so
and it was interesting, and then we searched into a little bit, absolutely sent an email to Cost about that, or why this person doesn't. It was Fabiana, I think. It wasn't your group. Mika was it Fabiana. Anyhow, I think we also sent to Cost an email about this, on what is the thing. I guess best thing is to make some tests, but anyhow, if you haven't get an email, haven't got at all, and you are wondering about this, best thing is to just send an email to me or Haralabia. If you send it to me, I will forward you to Haralabia. Okay, and Haralabia will look into it, and also send an email directly to the working group leader. Okay, letting them know that okay, I'm here, I exist, and I'm interested.
Okay, great, thank you.
Other comments?
What do you expect from us?
How many people will it take to gather?
I have to check the words.
Five. How many?
No, it's more, but I'm not sure. I have to check. Actually, sorry, just it's related to the. No, it's not awkward. Listen, like honestly, administrating a project like this is a headache, And like from the experience of this first year, I know pretty well that we are doing this. I have this list of Cost provides us their own list, but I also have my own list. So for each event, there is, the budget that has been allocated, the budget eventually spent, and the state we are in globally. So I try to keep track of that. So for instance, in the first year it has happened, like in Weimar, for instance, we spent something like 12,000 less than expected. Okay, this means that in the next event we could have 12,000 more if we want. So for an event that happens in September, the sincere question is that I have no idea. Because okay, I have a number in the working group plan and I think it's something like 10 people. But that's just a number, it will largely 10 people. 10. But it will largely depend on the state of the budget up to that point. Because if we sit up to that point, you have like spent 10,000 less than what is expected, which is not, it's very easy to happen. We could bring 6 more people. And also last year, Cost thought that we were doing great, I guess. This is what I told myself. So they decided to give us a top-up, a significant top-up. Okay, so in the middle of the year.
In what field, like on what subject? Doing great as what?
Well, I don't know, but I'm thinking that since they decided to give us more money, we are doing something correct.
Something correct, yes.
I have
but
no idea.
Is it because you achieved certain...
I have no idea. I just got an email that listen, Marinos, if you want, you can get like 30,000 euros
And you
more.
didn't ask why?
Is that really question? Of course no.
No,
of course I didn't
I'm
ask.
kidding.
I was like, thank you.
I think I remember that it was related to the fact that we were doing a lot of actions and a lot of activities. And,
that's something actually
they were
very...
saying that oftentimes in the first year of these projects it's very, very slow to get going.
That's my question. Is it because you are socially engaging more people, or you are achieving the university goals, or is it because there is...
I really have no idea, but what you should all know if you're interested in this, because I've been many times to Brussels, for these kind of cost events. What I came to realize gradually is that our project is quite unique. It's probably the first and only project that relates to the arts. Okay, it's probably just one out of, like this particular time frame, there are just 2 projects or maximum 3 out of 100 that are from humanities. Okay, so cost is mostly, I go there and like the 95% of the people, they are into, working with gender application, geriatrics, quantum mechanics, cyclotrons, and they just have one event per year, a big one, and they spend, they have a very completely different structure. So for them, as I understand, as I talk with other people, what they do is that they have a huge conference. They spend lots of money bringing, like, 100 people there, and they spend a substantial amount of money for organization support to get posters and things. It's very different than what we do. We do like lots of events.
And you think that's the positive thing? I'm only asking because I think that is maybe a key point to have a bit of a more sustainable future with the project. Because if you know what you're doing right or wrong, it's possibly something you can work towards.
The problem is that, and I tell you that not just for cost, but because I'm in a few other research projects as well, and I'm also in a pretty big thing called the European University of Technology, which is supposed to be an alliance of technical universities all around the world. And the problem is always the same, that it's a political thing. The European Union somehow promised a coherent situation around Europe. But this is not the case. When you are in projects like this, you just have very different political and administrative mechanisms in place. Okay, so even if we arrive at something, it can't be implemented throughout Europe, because it will never happen, if you ask me. And then how it will not happen soon that Serbia, Turkey, Cyprus, Switzerland, and Paris will share the same mechanisms of distributing money and doing all this. It will never happen. So there is no point in this. If we want a self-sustainable network, we should somehow find ways to exploit, in positive sense, the existing sources for funding and resources, but also to come up with our own muscle, so that it's not the others that make policies for us, but we can also have something to say ourselves. And I guess what I may be trying to say in a soft way is that we should somehow reinvent a future form of forming something like a union, so to say, but not in the traditional sense, some kind of like post-union thing for the post-colonial world or something. But there are other projects that we have also, like there are these people working in the universal income, global income thing, and we invite them to talk about. It's okay, and I guess that we all, personally, I stand for a desire and the need to allow utopic thinking in our community around the world. But it should also be very grounded to reality, because there are people lives that depend on this, and especially in this time, it's very difficult to do art. Resources are, in certain parts of the world, they are just non-existent at all. Do you know any artist from Moldova? Who knows any artist from Moldova? Okay. Why? So why the rest of you don't know any artist from Moldova?
Well, we know actually more complicated.
It's always
very complicated, because in 2005
14 that I was in Berlin, and there was an exhibition that I can't remember the name, but it was actually Turkey, Greece, and Bulgaria. And it was funded by Goethe.
Yeah, I know the book.
What happened was that the introduction of the person from Goethe is, what do we know about Greek art, Turkish art, and Bulgarian art? And now we are in Athens, almost like 10 years after, and things have changed. So it's a matter of, these things are obviously cooptation and lots of other things, but it is beyond than the politics relate to, you know, what it is visible and what is not visible, who wants to see it. But,
yeah, I guess the question is who owns the resources. So in this case, it was the Goethe Institute that owned the resources. I know this project very well. I was actually part of that.
Yeah, I can't remember the name now, but
Anyhow, and also I collaborate still with Goethe, and we are still trying to do it. It's part of also post-another project. But what I want to say is that in this case, essentially, it's Goethe Institute that has the power and the money and the resources to initiate this discussion. What I am trying to say is that if we want sustainability in this goal, it should be Turkey, it should be Bulgaria that would initiate this discussion, and that would kind of control how the available resources, or at least have a say, not control, have a say on how the available resources from Germany or whatever they are coming are being used. Because in this case, what currently happens typically, I mean, I'm not overgeneralizing, there are of course numerous exceptions to this, but what normally happens, let's not lie about this, you know, is that you have an institution and they have some main curator and say, okay, this is your job to do this, and then they try to approach some curators in these countries and they create a network and they directly, you know, talk with these people. So yeah, they do ask what they think it's important to be represented, blah, blah, blah. But in the end of the day, they all kind of report to the organization and the institutional controls of it. So if there are any questions of power, any questions of politics and so on, they are reflected from top to bottom. But what we're trying to do is the opposite, to have a certain kind of structure that we have the decisions to be reflected from bottom to up, so that you have all those individual actors represent their own reality. I don't have any solution, of course, and I'm very open to discuss all these things with you. Honestly, you know, as an action share of this, my main job is to be very realistic and pragmatic. So for me, the thing is like, okay, how much money do we have this year? What is the best thing we can do with this money? Okay, let's do it. That's it, you know. And I try to make things break down. These questions are super important. They float in the air. But I think that they should be, any solution should be tried out in practice before we actually adopt it. Don't know, let's see. I mean, for as long as we can get funding to work in this direction, we should exploit it, do things, create this toolkit, and to see how it goes. I want to see some optimism.
No, working. No, I agree with you in principle. I was just thinking that, yeah, I mean, sustainability is not necessarily a stream of money that is constantly coming from somewhere or from the sky. It's more also about creating a more sustainable world overall, and it's a matter of rephrasing or renaming the ways of the ways we refer towards these care topics that you opened. So it's a very, very large topic, and if we start now, we'll never finish.
No, I agree. But I have a super objection here, and it's the same thing I said in Paris. It has nothing to do with the project. It's
not about
the project, it's about general. And what I said also in Paris is that we should all understand that there is money. There is lots of money. It's just that they decide to give them elsewhere.
Yeah,
and
so
our job is to kind of
demand
this money because they also belong to culture. Okay, so yeah, I mean, and we saw that in COVID. There was enough money to make like, to give it the public health care, Okay, but certain countries, Greece included, they chose not to reinforce the public health system. That's a political decision. It didn't happen because there was not enough money. The European Union gave a lot of money in this. They just decided, and in several other countries in the world, not to use this money to public health. Okay. I might be wrong in this, but I think that this Περίπατος των Αθηνών was done with money coming for the COVID, right? I might be wrong in this, okay, I'm not sure. But yeah, let's not kid ourselves. And I think that this is why I get a little bit emotional about this. Is I think that as artists we are so get used to work with and to do things with nothing and no budget at all, that we forget that we have every right to decent budget like everybody else. We also pay taxes, we produce a lot, we are a very important part of society, and if governments choose to give more money to, you know, people in sports or in tourism or that, this is not something that we should tolerate. We demand this money for us, and one of the things that I guess that a project like this gives us a little bit of a muscle. Okay, I don't know if we will succeed in this, but it gives a little bit of a muscle to actually stand the voice and say, okay, listen, you people in whatever position you have, at least you join this discussion in the table like this, you know, and listen to us, at the very least, you know, and take us into account when you create legislations and regulations for this. Something like this, I don't know.
Fanny, you're doing something somewhere with that thought that was moving beyond the idea of sustainability being like a financial transaction. Okay, so
and in a way, it is related to what Marino says, but he's like looking at it from different angles, of course. Because for me, it's about also normalizing demanding money, but also normalizing have a diverse environment and equal opportunities and all these kind of things that he started talking about. And yeah, in that sense, sustainability, which brings the art community a step further than just being able to do one project, because now there is this money and then we start over again until there is another project. Or at least a project that can last forever. That would be more sustainable than that. Or because in the end, we cannot really change the world in one day, but things can happen and things do change. And I have been in a community of women artists in the men's world. I make electronic music. I've been doing this for many years in my life, like 20. And I see, I run a non-profit small foundation in the Netherlands. And I've seen things changing there really, really fast. Not that it's equal, but it's really fast. Within 5-6 years, when we started setting up talks and festivals, now things are very different. But of course, there's still a lot to be done. But things can happen. So in a way, I don't think we are completely...
and those changes you're mentioning as positive changes?
Yeah, positive changes. I mean, maybe there's needs to be done like really a lot still, but there is a difference. There is a difference on creating opportunities for diversity. So,
and they
yeah, that's not a bad thing, actually.
I mean, they weren't linked from financial muscle.
We did fund our actions through public money. And then we actually created more opportunities for non-binary or women artists in festivals who get paid through the festivals. So it works a bit like that for us. But we're a tiny little community, little group of people. It's not like we are something big. And it still works in a small country anyway, but with money. But
now you gave me an idea. I don't know if it's valuable, but maybe it is interesting in the framework of the project to brand this tool for care, and then that branding to be used further by each organization or individual, and to be recognized as sustainability. So when you build up like a brand, then this commercial value or money will enter. So I think that can be very interesting. And because it has this multi-interdisciplinary aspect, so it will be very interesting to develop it like such, because it will include conferences, festivals, publications, pilot, innovation, everything. So this Toolkit actually will be umbrella under which all the artists will work, even people like us will be.
Yeah, it could work, and I guess it could be also working in a centralized fashion, because just to explain that, at least from my point of view, when I'm talking about sustainability, I'm not talking about sustainability of this project. I'm talking about, you know, a sustained community of practice that kind of can guarantee that art, creative practices, workshops, all these nice things, experimental art, all of things we do, you know, that people in the generations to come will be also able to do. And probably Fanny is very right in that it's not just a question of money and resources.
It all comes down to money in the end, but it's about how do you
it's also about the question of structure, I guess.
I think it's quite interesting that it's trying to change the culture of what we do and how we conceive of care as always associated with maybe policy, or it needs a financial muscle. I mean, care already pre-exists for these ideas, let's say. So that I would find personally quite interesting, and how to reinvent the wheel rather than try to repeat everything that tried to make to become part of something that is already dysfunctional.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's very utopian, as was mentioned. But
you know, I've been thinking that again very practically. You know, if I didn't happen to have an academic job at the moment, and you know, because I used to live almost like, I don't know, 10, 15 years as a freelance artist, essentially. And if I didn't have an academic job at the moment when the pandemic happened, I would possibly, be living in the streets or something.
And that's
this is the
another
reality
topic,
for
because many
a
of
lot
us we are artists and we also survive through academia, like myself included. I'm a freelance artist and a lecturer, and without being a lecturer,
a lot of people, but the thing is, what I want to say is that when there was an urgency, for its greatest part, the cultural field and the creative field, I might be cynical, but I think that it collapsed in individualism. It was more like every man for himself, every woman for herself, something like this. Of course, gradually, there was some need, of course, and some movements for collectivity, for, demanding rights and things and so on. But I don't judge any of this. What I want to say is that essentially the problem was crystal clear at the moment. That even though that people into the creative culture, in the creative professions and artists, and academics, and young academics, even though they are a very important form of labor, they enjoy no security at all. And it was until COVID, and after COVID, that this came to be a question of life and death, essentially. So now COVID is over. What do we do with this knowledge? Do we wait for the next urgency, the next war, the next pandemic or something to realize that if we don't care for one another, we won't make it through it? And what do we wait to kind of stand up and demand this from the people who rules us, somehow? And I don't say that I know how, okay? I just say that, something has to be done in this direction.
Exactly. As Marinos said, all the postdoc funding, all of this funding that we have right now in education comes out from RRF, Recovery and Resilient Fund that is until 2026. So it's not a permanent solution. There are some money that comes out because of COVID, and we don't know what will be next. So there is a huge insecurity. We also in this discussion talk about.
And remember that when this urgency appeared, okay, Lufthansa or Aegean, they were given public money to survive.
Yeah.
So, I mean, public money to survive exists if you are a big company, I guess. But if you're working in the cultural field, you're a freelance artist, why can't you rely on a very tiny amount of public money to make it through the pandemic?
It's capitalism. Then because the economy will collapse, you cannot just let it go like that. You know, it's a bit like a,
yeah, that's the argument of but you know, if you, Ian what I was taught, you know, when I was young and I may be very old school in this is that, you know, if you give public money to companies, this is socialism, not capitalism. Capitalist is that, you know, you have a free market and, you know, you make money, and if you don't make enough profit, you close your company, and that's it.
This is not true.
Yeah, probably.
We know from before 30s that all the money of the state went directly to the companies and never to what we call about public sector and etc. So that was capitalism. Okay, don't define.
But what I want to say in this is that, okay, if we live in a society that has enough public money to save cancer, we should demand that they also spare some public money, and not necessarily public, that they also make sure that they guarantee that there will be cultural production over the next generations. What do you want, a world with just air travel but no art? Doesn't make any sense.
And what I want to say, because about the RRF funding, that all of those monies have specific targets. So it's very important somehow the artists or the scientists to decide about the subjects. Otherwise...
He's right in this. Because you don't want to reinvent like state building. It has happened here and it has happened in many countries. You know, that somebody with money comes and they save the cultural landscape in a way that it
now do gender, now do environmental, now do about something else. Yes.
So this is why I guess sustainability, as very well said, is not just about money. I guess I'm thinking aloud all this time. I hope you understand that. But it's also about having a say on how this money is spent, having a say yourself. Else it's colonialism. If you know it's the guy with the money telling you what to do, this is colonialism. We don't want to live in colonialism. So it's not like give us money and that's it. It's give us the agency and the resources, and if you don't give it, we take it ourselves.
Or we educate each other how to take it.
Yeah. Something like that is a sustainable model for cultural. Yeah. So, thank you everybody for being here with us. That was a last-minute event, but personally, I think it was a very successful one. I had already lots of interesting ideas and feedback to think about. Stay in touch with the project. Do send emails about your ideas. We try to be very open. We can't accommodate everybody, but we all, since you're here, you're all part of this, whether you like it or not. Make sure that you have signed the attendance list so that you can get paid. A very practical thing, when you go back, whatever you're coming from, the ones who have traveled from elsewhere, please, as soon as possible, file a cost claim to get reimbursed. This is super important. The grant period ends in a couple of days. Okay, and you have to